Welcome to another town hall session, number 14. It's good to see you all. My name is Jonas, and I'm today's host. And for those of you who do not already know, these town hall sessions are an opportunity for us to get you up to speed on what we have been doing, the progress we have made, and also address any questions the community may have. We are committed to make these sessions as clear and engaging as possible. That said, we are still refining how we break down these complex topics into simpler terms. And insofar as we may not fully have mastered this yet, we encourage you to ask questions if you have any as we go along. If there's anything that's confusing or anything you want to know more about, drop a question in the chat or join us on stage. All right. So with that being said, I just want to give you a small highlight of today's agenda. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Let's see here. Yeah. All right. So for today, we are gonna cover 3 topics. First, we will have Carsten doing a demo where he'll show us how he's able to run a node on a Raspberry Pi. And in this regard, we'll also just talk a bit about nodes, how it's going to work in the future and stuff like that. And then next we will cover the governance side of things, where we'll give you an update on our new section on the docs.gov Tagion site, where we have written a lot about fees and rewards and how that's going to work in the system. And then finally, just to give a bit more clarity on exchange listings, we are going to simply explaining our approach to this exchange listing process. So that will be the last point on today's agenda. So with that being said, let's start out with a short demo. So Carsten, I'll hand it over to you.
Could you swap around so Carsten unmute and you mute?
Yeah, yes. So can you see my screen? How is that? Entire screen. So this one. I guess. Yeah. This one. Oh, can you see my screen? Probably you can. Hope. Yeah, good.
Yes.
So we have just we have made a small demonstration on Raspberry Pi. So this is a Raspberry Pi. It's a small computer. It's actually a mobile chip inside, but you can see it's the size of a small wallet or something. And we have made a simple description on how to install it on a Raspberry Pi. We are running an Ubuntu version on the Raspberry Pi. So it's if somebody knows something about Raspberry Pi, this is a Raspberry Pi 5. So it has 8 GB of RAM, and we have added 265 GB USB stick. So it's actually booting. You can see it behind here. It's actually booting on that. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Anyway, so what you can do is actually, if you have a Raspberry Pi, here I have, can you see my image? I hope. So in principle here, you can just install it like on a normal PC. So, and then you can compile it. And then there is a script in the repository. So you can start. I've of course prepared everything here. It's like TV kitchen where you prepare all the food. So we just run it here. We just first generate some wallets. It already exists, and then we run the network with this command here. And now we wait for the network to start. So in this case, we are running in mode 0 with of course, now it doesn't work, and that should probably because we should we have already created something. Yeah, we already run the network, and we need to remove our network. So we'll do it again. Yeah. Now it's building the network up. Yeah, and now it's generating, actually, you can see that it's generating epochs and it also generating bullseyes. So you can see a new bullseye, and for each different node, where now we're running on the Raspberry Pi, we're running 5 nodes. So node 0 to 5. And we can actually also ask, we actually need to log in to the Raspberry Pi. This is our IP number, so we can just log in and see how much resources it's using. We can just do a top, and this is Neuvel is our program, so we can see it's using, for this machine, it's using running 5 nodes. It's using 10% of the one processor. A Raspberry Pi have 4 cores, so it's actually using very little. It's not very much, and it's using 0.4 memory percent of memory. So it's very lightweight, and it's running 5 nodes in one machine. Yeah, so that's actually it, I think.
Yeah. So, is there an echo when I speak? Okay, you muted yourself. But yeah, maybe just to give a bit more clarity on this and to bring it down to layman terms. I guess what this shows, Carsten, is that the hardware requirements for actually running a node is extremely low, and at the end of the day, that just means that it becomes much easier for us to actually decentralize the network. Whereas for some other networks, you need specialized hardware equipment to running a node, meaning that only rich people or entities, people with a lot of money actually, and a lot of specialized knowledge actually have the capacity to run these nodes. Whereas here, mostly everyone can run a node, which at the end of the day would make the network more decentralized. So I guess that's sort of the takeaway from this demo right here, right?
Yeah, it's actually, if you see that the Raspberry Pi is actually the same as a mobile chip, so it's not more powerful than a normal mobile chip. It's actually an older version of. If you have a modern phone today, it's much more powerful than this one. So yeah, it doesn't demand a lot of resources. Of course, when the network scales and we have more traffic, then it would, of course, demand more. But it's not the network in itself; it's more the processing of transaction that would demand more, but not the base level, you can say. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then I see Christian asked if there is documentation for running a node on Raspberry Pi. Do we have that yet, or?
Yeah, I have an initial description of what I did. It's just what kind of commands you actually have to do to install it. It's actually on the. I can just throw the link in. So
Let me just share it.
Yeah. So it's Atlanta. Did you share it? Okay. So yeah. So it's actually just. So you just need to, of course, install Ubuntu on a Raspberry Pi. And what we do, we boot it from a USB because SD is slower. So we boot it from a USB stick. So and it's faster. So that's why. But it doesn't demand much resources. So you can also just test it on SD. It will just run a little slower. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. So before we move on, I just want to hear if there's anyone on the podium or if there's anyone in the audience who wants to add something or have any questions.
And it's half a question, I'm pretty sure about the answer, but maybe it'll be interesting for the listeners as well, or the people watching the recording. So what you just did is not running a node on the Tagion for and with the Tagion mainnet, but you created your own limited private network on your Raspberry Pi using the Tagion code, but there's no connection to the current mainnet, right?
Yeah. It's actually a complete network running in a test mode. So it's 5 nodes running on a Raspberry Pi. It's just what we use, but it's actually the same version as running not the same version because the version we have right now is 1 year old, but it's the same function that is running on the mainnet right now. So, yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? I guess.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied actually? I mean, normally, I guess software systems will utilize quite a lot of resources, right? Are you satisfied with the performance and resource utilization here? What do you think of this compared to the whole design of the system?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I am asking you.
Yeah, I think it's very satisfying. I like it. It's I think it just shows that the system is pretty robust. And what I actually like with it is that we just pulled. We have to think about. Normally, you're running on big servers with Intel processors and very advanced things. We just pull this system on a Raspberry Pi from Git and actually install the compiler and just compile it and run it without we didn't change any code or anything. It's just the same code because normal servers are running another processor. This is running a mobile processor. It's running an ARM processor. So it's not the same as, it's a completely different hardware. But the code just executes without any problem. So I think it's a nice, it means that sort of the base is pretty robust. So.
Yeah, and if you compare this to a big normal mining rig or whatever it is, a big validator node, like having a full server farm or something to just operate, this is not a lot of resources you actually spend to operate 5 nodes here, which nearly utilizes no resources, right? It's like next to nothing, basically. It's less than a game on a mobile phone, basically. It's nothing. And yeah, that's impressive. it's also impressive it just runs, but the resource utilization is very impressive. Yeah. And I don't know if we should have a long talk about this, Jonas, but I think it's interesting also because it's the way the core team has architectured from the outset, building it from binary level and up, and everything has been made, you could say, I don't know, call it simple, but with some strict architectural principles, and everything been built from scratch on low level. So meaning it runs and compiles directly to optimize binary code, basically, that just execute extremely efficient, right? Yeah, that's quite an achievement. It's not just something you just do when you build software. I don't know if you have any comments to this, Carl. I think also people are asking, why does it take this long to build a project, right? It's like, yeah, when you write things from scratch and don't just take existing VMs or software components or whatever, then it actually takes a couple of hours to do, right? It's a big effort.
Yeah, I think it's because everything is we didn't just download half of the internet and just implement it. It's actually built. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, unless there's any other questions right now, if there's anything else to add, I think we'll move on to the next topic. Yeah. All right. So let's do that. I'll just share my screen again, and then we'll talk a bit about fees and rewards in Tagion. Because for the past month or so, we have spent quite some time working on the pricing mechanisms within the system, figuring out how it should work. So we just submitted a new section to this page, Tagion, where we have included fees and rewards structures, which you can find under the section called Token Economy. So we are still in the process of populating this page with proposals for how the system will operate in the system in the future on the governance side. But here you see the one of the first proposals. And yeah, as mentioned, it relates to fees and rewards. So essentially, what we did here was asking ourselves, if a decentralized system requires contributors such as node operators, developers, etc., to operate, how do we ensure that these contributors are sufficiently or adequately compensated for the services they provide? So that was sort of the outset. And yeah, based on this, we as most systems do, we decided on using TDN to reward them. And this is, this has been like the strategy from the start, that TDN is sort of the native token of the system, the one that is being used to accessing services on the network and paying these contributors. This is what we call a utility token. And the way we decided to structure it was by saying that we have this thing called a treasury at the heart of the network, which sits on a lot of TDN token. Actually, from the outset, half of the total supply has been allocated for this treasury, which in the future will be fully community cup. You can also find more information about this in our tokenomics paper, which we released, I don't know, 1.5 years ago. But essentially, we have this treasury, which holds a lot of Tagion tokens, and it uses its holdings of TDN tokens to reward contributors. So that's sort of like a continuous outflow of TDN tokens. On the other hand, there's also users pay fees into the treasury. So they do that whenever they execute. They do executions. So that could be somebody just doing a transaction on the network. Whenever they use relay nodes. Whenever they use subsystems, etc. These are that's actually what is being described here. That there are 4 channels through which the treasury accumulates TDN, which then is redistributed to node operators, developers, etc. So what we then did was saying that. And this is a bit contrary to how most people envision a market or the economy to function. So if you have ever heard an economist talking, they'll probably talk to you about supply and demand. So that at the end of the day, it's the market that through supply and demand dynamics determine the price of a good or a service. This is how it works in theory. It's not how it actually works in the real world. And there has been a lot of empirical data to support this. That in fact, how companies how they set prices is not determined by supply and demand. It's determined by them estimating costs, their ongoing costs for running the business, and then setting a markup fee. So that's simply it. That's how most companies they set their prices. This is what a guy named Gardner Means from the 1930s, I think, he called administered pricing. So we sort of took this concept and say, okay, this is how companies work. Let's do the same thing here. So what we did is saying that the prices within the Tagion system should be administered. They should be set by the community. It should not be set by supply and demand dynamics. It should be governed by the people who comprise this network. So in the future, it will be the community who continuously set the price for using the system. So that could be execution fees, subsystem taxes, all these different channels through which TDN tokens flow into the treasury. And then on the other hand, it's also up to the community to decide how to reward different contributors, such as node operators, developers, all these different participants that one way or another contribute directly to maintaining the Tagion network. So that's actually more or less the basic idea here. We have, and you can find it in this document. We have provided some examples of like a framework for how the community in the future can set these prices, determine the fees and the rewards. But at the end of the day, it's really up to the community to decide. So we can only provide like a framework for how the community should think about this. So that's actually more or less it. But you can read it all in here if you're more curious about it. And then of course, if you have any questions, you can always post them in the Discord group or Telegram, or we can discuss it on the next town hall. We can also discuss it now. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that, or if there's any questions. All right.
I think if you would show, Jonas, for those who cannot remember, we had the old picture of in and outflow for the treasury and the functions of the channels. I don't know if you had that, just to give an illustration on what works from
I see it. It's bugged here, but let me just show you. I'll find it here.
If you let me share my screen, I can show it.
Okay,
But
cool. I'll do that. I'll jump off just a second.
Because it is exactly as you were saying, Jonas, right? We are following our principles, which we set out, and now we're just making it. Now we're trying to actually make it concrete and implement the first part of the fees. And make it operational. There it is.
Not sure. Can you read the letters on it though?
A bit difficult, but
You can, if you hit F11, then it'll go full screen on your browser.
That's also perfectly fine. That looks good, Landa.
Okay, there we go. My apologies.
Didn't write it in. What? No, it didn't.
Now it disappeared. Who knows? Go back.
No.
But what we can say then is that it will be updated in the online.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
It's worth a read and a visit.
Yeah, and it's very nice. All of you are documenting it on the documentation side, also for the Raspberry and also for the token economics, so we can always see what we agreed on and discuss it.
Yeah. And that's actually also another thing to add, that it's not only about you asking questions, but if there's anything you think is a bad idea, we really want to hear that. But yeah, so we want to be, as we have emphasized time and time and again, we want this to be a community project and not some top-down governed thing with Descartes deciding everything. So if you have any suggestions, we would love to hear it. Yeah.
And just to mention, I don't know if there's another section where this would come, but along with these sections from the token economy, there's also the first entries to the glossary being published. So more and more of the also general information about Tagion and networks and all the jargon is coming online on this page now. So keep an eye out for this. And if there's major updates, we'll also publish that on the Discord channel for you to have a look with a direct link.
Yes, exactly. All right. So I see Lucas is writing in the chat. But maybe let's just go on to the next topic on our agenda, which is exchange listing. And maybe Thijs, you could give a status on that.
I'll say a few words. So
yeah.
There's been some good questions in the chat recently, which you more or less answered, Jonas, and which we agree on. And it is like this: we don't have a set milestone or target for going on an exchange. So there is no set target, but we say we have some conditions that needs to be reached before we will try to actually go on an exchange. Also because when we start the process in itself, it will require a lot of resources and capital for that matter. And we would like to focus our resources, the scarce resources we have, on first things first. So what is the first things we need to do? We need to have our network in a resilient mode, have it more distributed and decentralized. We call it mode 2. It's also documented in the docs. I don't know if somebody can pull it up here, make a link in the chat. That's number one. So it's not fully, you could say, only operating on one server, and also is less resilient, so it's distributed. That's our first one. The second one is, and that will probably be reached rather soon in the summer. Then the other thing is the commercial part, the demand part. We need to ensure we have demand for tokens. And that's why we are focusing hard on business development, making projects built on the system. We don't know what is enough It could be one project, it could be 10 projects, depends on the utilization of each project, basically. But that's, of course, what is required to create some real utility. And that means like real demand, not speculative demand for the tokens. And that's like our own internal guiding principles. When those have been reached, we will start to explore possibilities for exchanges, and not before. And then where would we like to go on the exchange and which exchanges? This is only speculation, but we have many European investors and many Danish investors. So it would make sense to be in a European exchange. That probably is one thing. What can we more say about? I don't know what there is more to say. But this is basically the strategy, and it's based on first demand on the system before we try to go on an exchange. So it's more long term, and that's the strategy we have chosen and is choosing. And when that is said, community members can, of course, list the Tagion tokens on an exchange because it's an open system. We cannot really decide if anybody is interacting with it on an exchange. So that's, of course, always a possibility. And everybody else can also build projects on the system. That's also a possibility. But we are not doing it right now from you could say core card point of view, at least. That's not in our interest. We want to build utility first.
Exactly.
I think that's it, right, Jonas? I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah.
If there were other questions. It's just to make it very clear. It's not that we don't want to go on exchange. We just want to do first thing first and actually create utility. We don't want it to be some kind of speculative assets that has no real utility whatsoever. There is enough of those coins, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
There's a question in the chat. For
Yeah.
you, Ted, I think, or Jonas.
Yeah. So Lucas is asking how it makes sense to say that a market is not driven by supply and demand when you need to stay competitive. You need to stay give a competitive pricing to compete in the market. That's actually how I understand the question. So I think a good way of thinking about this is saying that if let's take a Harry Potter book. So whenever a Harry Potter was first published, maybe only 10 people bought it. But then suddenly it gained popularity and a lot of people bought it, and suddenly J.K. Rowling was selling, I don't know, millions. But what happened to the price? Nothing. It stayed the same. And that actually is how companies work. In the face of increasing demand, they don't increase the price. They simply set the price as a markup over their costs. So there has been a lot of studies where you talk to companies and they're not familiar with marginal utility and all of these supply-demand curves. That's not how they think. They just simply think in terms of costs and markups. That's how they operate, and that's also why you see in the face of shifting supply and demand, the price does not tend to follow what economists believe it should. But I agree. I completely agree with what you're saying. They need to stay competitive, and they would try to cut their costs. At least some companies would. Some companies actually benefit from not necessarily reducing their costs, but then they are able to, beat their competitors in other ways. But it's just to say that, inspired by how markets actually work, how companies actually work, that they set their prices as a markup over cost, which could be referred to as administered pricing. We have opted for a somewhat similar approach here, also to keep the fees and the rewards somewhat stable. again, if you have this completely atomized world of a lot of small companies that constantly change their prices in the phase of fluctuating supply and demands, then you would have a price that goes like this. And with this administered pricing model, you can actually have prices that are quite stable. So I also think that's from a user perspective, that's also quite important. Whereas you have something like Ethereum, I think at least some have tried to use Ethereum and knows how buggy it can be to if the network is really congested. Years ago you could pay like $50 to execute a smart contract, like a transaction. So that's far from ideal, and that's where I think this model is way superior.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's a very good way to see it. Like when we speak to people and also ask people who are already building projects on other systems, they are always, the first thing they're asking about is what is the pricing, what is the fees, and can we actually count on the fees will be the same tomorrow? Because then they say they did some projects and then the next day they need to close it because they will just kill themselves in fees because they thought they would pay 50 cents on transaction, but then they paid $50 and then it didn't work basically. And so I think it's extremely important to be able to make a budget and make a business model if you create an application, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work from a business point of view. That's important. And that's, very important. And then, of course, there is this span, right, with like competition. And I see it like in the lower end, you have the basic costs of what it costs to operate. For example, buying the hardware, power, utility, whatever. Cost to operate it, that's the basic cost. If you go below this, at some point, the operators will start to leave the network and go bankrupt, basically, or basically because there is no money in it. Of course, if you go too high on prices, then all the users will disappear, right? Because it simply doesn't make sense. So there is some kind of span that makes sense to operate in and optimize in, and I think that's naturally also how things work. Like, yeah.
And also, if you were to create, for example, on the node side, if you were to create competition, there would new attack vectors would emerge. So, for example, one big entity could simply just underbid the other nodes for a long time, to the extent that the other nodes do not have sufficient incentives to actually run a node, which of course then would just centralize the network. So it's just, I think, just the idea, which I think a lot of people are so hooked on having this supply and demand dynamics determining market prices. That's like it belongs to the realm of economics, which belongs to the realm of stupid ideas.
Yeah,
that's how I see it.
And actually, I think it's a cool model because we want to have the system sustainable, not only in the short term, but forever. So it needs to be economically sustainable and also secure. So we want to have actually an economic flow that actually is self-sustainable. So nobody from the outside needs to put in money, or we empty the treasury for that matter, like politicians would do, like just create subsidiaries and then we whatever. We need to make it sustainable on the long term. Nobody's going to pay anybody here to do this except from the system itself or the users. Yeah.
Certainly. All right.
Yeah.
But I think that's more or less it. So at the end, is there anyone who has something to add or any questions to ask? Then it's now. Otherwise, I'll let you know that the next town hall is in a month, on the 6th of March. It's a Thursday, same time as today. So yeah, hope to see you all then. Yeah, and until then, have a great time.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time around. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.